get asked a lot about current affairs and what.
No, but
yeah. But we want to get down to the music aspect of things.
Cool.
And, you're on the hip hop scene. You're in the hip hop scene. What does those two words mean to you?
Hip hop. Hip hop means, hip comes from the Wolof verb hippie. It means to open your eyes and see. Wolof is a West African language. Hop, English, signifying movement, to hop. So hip hop, as KRS-One explains, is intelligent movement, is a term of enlightenment. So that's what I understand hip hop to mean, and therefore the culture of hip hop is about intelligent movement, as far as I understand.
Okay, excellent. So, what are your thoughts on the current UK hip hop scene, whether it be underground or whether it be the commercial side, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on the scene are, I mean, I've kind of been clear about this a few times. It's like, even words like commercial and underground, who decides which is which? The decision about what's commercial and what's underground isn't based on whether or not people will buy a particular style of music. It's based on whether or not the radio decides to play a certain type of music. When Wu-Tang were on the radio making the most hard-sounding, lyric-driven, no chorus having hip-hop, they were selling millions of records. Triumph was a single of the first rap album to go +1 in the UK. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't believe there's such a thing as commercial and non-commercial music. Bob Marley sold 100+ million records, making some of the most message-driven, revolutionary music of the 20th century. So I feel that the hip-hop scene is in a dilemma it's always been. In fact, I'll take it one step further. The music industry generally is in the position it's always been, where everyday people, particularly working class people of colour, make music that reflects their position in the society, let's say. But they don't own the means of production, they don't own the routes to market, etc. And therefore, to become commercially successful, to varying degrees, you're forced to conform to what people who are already rich, who usually don't look like you, want to hear and want to support. And so that puts you in an incredibly difficult position, and that's reflected in the music artists making. And then artists get arrogant about making music that appeals essentially to middle-aged guys in suits.
Yes.
What they are willing to allow their daughters and sons to hear is basically the issue.
Sure.
You get some exceptions to that. But I think that said, all of that said, there is some health in the scene. There's a lot of lyricism coming out. There's a lot of creativity. I'd love to see the instruments come back. I don't know at what point we decided that we weren't allowed to play instruments, but urban music seems to have decided that we're allergic to playing, I don't know, guitar or trumpet or whatever else. I'd love to see young rappers forming bands. I mean, could you imagine 5 rappers coming together who can all really rap?
Yeah.
One plays bass, one plays guitar, one plays drums, one plays trumpet. That would be sick. Why are we not doing it? What, are we allergic to instruments? The reason why hip hop evolved was because these people were partly because they were being deprived of that access to instruments, not because they couldn't play them. All right, let's be clear. The people who founded hip hop, their parents, half of them were jazz musicians or blues musicians or whatever else. The Bronx and parts of New York, social welfare programs were cut. Funding for tuition, schools, all this economic catastrophe meant that people who've been playing instruments for generations all of a sudden didn't have access to instruments.
Sure.
It wasn't that they'd made a decision to stop playing. It seems to me we've now made a decision to stop playing, which I think is suicidal.
So, I mean, from that, where do you see maybe in the next 5-10 years the UK hip hop scene actually evolving or
I don't know.
Revolutionising?
I don't know. That's not in my control. I don't have a glass ball, to be honest. It's about the decisions we make as a scene. It's going where we're going. If we decide we're going to embrace knowledge, if we decide we're going to embrace artistic excellence, that will be reflected in the scene. If we decide we're going to be cheap copies of what's coming out of America, then that will be reflected in the scene. So, I don't know. I only know what I want to do.
No, fair enough. I mean, going back to what you were saying in terms of the middle-aged businessmen who are controlling the scene and so on, do you think that's an indication of all the, a lot of intelligent lyrics and stuff being watered down, being dumbed down?
Of course.
And being fed out into the wider society for for basically, I mean, it's basically what advertising does. You know,
I mean, this is nothing.
So, is that what you feel?
Of course, but this is nothing new. Let's be clear, right? We can go back even into some of our own indigenous cultures. You can go back to West Africa in the 1300s. And what did the kings do? They employed a griot, right? A griot was a poet and praise singer and musician. The king would employ his personal family of griots to sing tales about how wonderful the king was, because he knew that the artist had the power, right? So this isn't nothing new. In today's society, if Gucci wants to sell you clothes, what do? They attach it to rap music. The most influential music there is in terms of young people's spending habits. It's not rocket science. Why does anyone even know what Cristal is? It's only because you've heard it in rap music. Let's not pretend we knew what Cristal was before then, because we're not from France. You know, so it's so obvious that there's some message they'd like to push. There's others they wouldn't. It's not conspiracy. It's common sense.
So, what was your ultimate goal when you started rapping? When you started writing lyrics, what was your ultimate goal? Did you think, you know, in a few years' time, I'm going to be spreading a positive message, or was it from the get-go that you thought, do you know what, I'm going to be totally different. I'm going to be the one who will revolutionize or break all the barriers and not conform to what America is doing right now in terms of...
No, it was always a wrestling match, to be honest. It was a wrestling match not just with myself, but with my business partners, with my producer. It was a constant conflict of my producer and my business partner, for their own reasons, wanted me to make music that was more commercial. I didn't want to make music that was more commercial, and we met in the middle sometimes, you know. And so that's been a constant conflict. And at the end of the day, you have to exist, you have to live. If you want to be an artist as a career. But I don't think when I set out, if you listen to my early music, I don't think the vision of what I wanted to say is anywhere near as clear as it is today. So it's not like I started out and said, yep, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to say, this is where I'm going. It was a process. I started out and my music was greasy, as people would say. It was just greasy. There was a little bit of a message in there, but 90% of it was the same themes that we hear. Maybe not the materialism, but certainly the violence, certainly a bit of the misogyny, certainly the anger, because that's how I felt, that's what I was surrounded by. So it's only gradually I've changed, and that's reflected in my music.
Knowledge is Power is your latest mixtape, which is a powerful title in itself. Where did that title come about, and why did you choose that as an appropriate mixtape title?
I think it came out. I've been doing, as you may or may not know, I've been doing like a few online freestyles over the last kind of few years, and it was interesting because I'll be honest, when I did my first F64, I was quite surprised by the reaction. I thought people would like it, but I had maybe the wrong impression that I didn't get quite a sense of just how much thirst there was out there for that kind of content. So the reaction, in many ways, there's been more reaction to that one little freestyle and the Fire in the Boost that followed it than to any song that I've ever put out, and they cost me nothing to do. I didn't shoot a video, I didn't have to promote them. And particularly when the second Fire in the Boost dropped, which I thought was an even kind of harder content, that I thought would upset a lot of people. Like, I really thought a lot of people would get their knickers in a twist. And that didn't come either. People were like, yeah, well, what he's saying is kind of true, you know. It's like, I respect that. And so this phrase, knowledge is power, was something I was saying at the beginning of these things, and it's something that's become like it's a truism, it's a fact. You know? The reason why the people are where they are in the world today, that control the world, is not just military, that's part of it. It's not just economic, that's part of it. But they have a monopoly on the knowledge. They understand how the economy works. They understand our history better than we do and know what to hide from us and not what to hide from us. They understand propaganda, so their knowledge is what keeps them in power. I don't agree with it, but their knowledge of how to manipulate human beings, how to market particular things, how to keep you shut out of an economy, you know, even their knowledge of warfare, you know, the knowledge of how to make nuclear weapons keeps some countries where they are able to do whatever they want and bully the rest of the world. You know, it's a bad application of knowledge, but it's still their knowledge that is at the root of their power, not just aggression. They could be as aggressive as they want. If they didn't have the knowledge of how to make atom bombs, they'd just be throwing spears at people, do you know what I mean, or cutting people. So I just think that the knowledge is power is a human truism, and it's about how do we use now the knowledge that we have access to take power from those that have unjust power.
Okay, so coming, you know, on the back of that, what do you think is the highest knowledge one can obtain?
Knowledge of self.
Knowledge of self.
Yeah, we have to know ourselves.
Excellent. So is there, I know you read a lot of books and stuff, is there a particular book that you can recommend for people to start, questioning themselves or to start?
Okay, yeah, if it's about getting to know yourself, yeah, there's a book by a brother called Jiddu Krishnamurti, and it's called The Awakening of Intelligence. Anything by him generally, but particularly The Awakening of Intelligence. It's a book that really makes you look inside yourself. Or The Tao Te Ching as well is another book. Those are kind of two books that I sort of refer to on a weekly or daily basis. Just a little bit of verse here, verse there.
Excellent. Couple of more questions. In your mixtape, you're challenging the words, hard or gangster and cool and stuff. Has that challenging listeners been a challenge in itself? Because I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
And kids are consistently talking about, oh sir, I've got swag, I'm harder than this, I'm harder than that person. And they resolve things by fighting or arguing because that's what they see on TV or that's what they listen to through music. Challenging your listeners, has that been a challenge in itself?
Yeah, challenging listeners is difficult because we're conditioned for very good reason to believe that being aggressive to other young people like ourselves. So if you're poor working class white kids in East Glasgow or living in this part of Birmingham, or if it's African Caribbean kids or Pakistani kids or Indian kids, be aggressive amongst yourself, no problem. And we'll encourage that. And we'll even tell you you're a gangster if you do it. If you shoot other people that look like you, we'll make you look cool, we'll make films about it, be wonderful. Everyone will think you're really cool. If you shoot police, we're not going to make you look like that. If you lead the Haitian Revolution, we're not going to make any films about you. If you lead the rebellions that were in India in the late 40s, we're not going to make you look cool because we don't like that kind of rebellion. We don't mind it when you fight each other, that's fine, right? So there's very good reason why we're sold some things as cool and other things as, look at the Black Panthers, they're not marketed as cool, are they? They're marketed as cool sort of to a particular left wing, but in the mainstream media, they're looked at as terrorists, right? They're not looked at in context of a society that had been terrorizing that population for about 3.5 centuries. They're looked at as dangerous, a bit scary. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But the Crips, on the other hand, who've murdered thousands of people, are cool, right? But who have the Crips murdered? Other black people, right? If the Crips had killed that many middle-class white people, would anyone think bandana waving was cool? Let's just be real. Let's not get upset. Let's not ask questions. You can wave a blue bandana around in a video on MTV, but if you were saying, yo, I went across to to Beverly Hills and done some drive-bys in some rich houses in Beverly Hills, you wouldn't be on MTV allowed to say that. But you can say, yo nigga, yo Long Beach. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, let's be real. You can market black self-destruction as cool. You can't market fighting back against a racist, classist system as cool. So I'm trying to challenge people to realise why they're fed. Even if you look at football hooligan violence. Yeah. Sorry to go on about it, but it's like, I wouldn't say it's marketed as cool, but it's marketed as tongue-in-cheek, kind of funny, Look at these, chavs running around beating each other up. That's how it's looked at in the society, right? They've even got these programs in places like Watford and all these places where, drunk, predominantly working class white English people are going around beating each other up. And we're told it's funny. Jeremy Kyle show, another one, it's funny. But it wouldn't be funny if they were going to Hampstead and punching people in the face, or Knightsbridge. No one would find that funny because you're not supposed to extort rich people. You're supposed to stay in your place.
Even Plan B had this, challenging the word chav as a demeaning, and an insulting thing. Is that something that you agree with?
Of course, it's demeaning. It's a way of dehumanizing people. Yeah. We're taught to believe in this country that, in fact, we're almost taught as people of colour, in some weird way, we're allowed to sort of play the victimhood card. And in a way that's encouraged because it avoids a discussion also of what this country did here. Everything it did outside this country, rich people did, they did to poor white people here. Maybe not on the same scale, but it was done here. The first slaves sent to America weren't Africans, they were Scottish and Irish people. No one likes to talk about that today because it's like, we don't really want to admit that. We can accept that we enslaved black Africans. We can accept maybe that we enslaved Indians, but we don't want to talk about what was done here. It leaves a foul taste in them. So people are encouraged to buy into this idea of Britishness. But when people are being called chavs, this is the legacy of the people who've been dehumanized by a system, continuing to be dehumanized by a system and outcasted from that system. But then it's schizophrenic, because on the one hand they're told they're really British, you know, and they should love the monarchy and they should join the EDL and the BNP. And on the other hand, in the mainstream narrative, they're called chavs. So this is the British society playing class against race, and encouraging working class white people to believe that Britishness and whiteness are synonymous, and that somehow they're more British, but then simultaneously treating them as if they're not accepted. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of divide and conquer.
Of course it's divide and conquer. Because
yeah.
the average working class white person has far more in common with me or you than they do with David Cameron.
Yeah.
But by telling them, oh, you're really British and you're part of this British identity, it hopefully diverts the real issue that we have far more in common with people that live next to us than we do with the people that live in 10 Downing Street or Buckingham Palace. And that's one of the ways they do it, is by dehumanizing.
Final question.
Cool.
What are you listening to? What's on your iPod at the moment?
I am listening to, in fact I was listening to on the way here, I've made a mixtape of the most random songs ever. So it begins with some classic dancehall tracks, it moves into a bit of Bjork, then a couple John Lennon tracks, and ends with, I got Nude, the Radiohead song Nude's on there, and ends with 3 or 4 Public Enemy songs. I don't know why, one day I was in a strange place and I just made a really random mixtape, so excellent. Go and check out any of those eyes.
Brilliant. Akala, thank you very much.
No problem. Big up.
Nice one. Thanks.